let's get into these questions. Like I said, we're going to go over 7 of them right now. And some of them might be a little bit, I know the answer to this, Marissa, I know to ask this question, but I still think they're very important to ask. And the more used to something you get, the more you get casual in it. And so I think it's good to have a reminder of like, oh yeah, I need to ask that question. Oh yeah, I need to figure that out. Hey there, and welcome to the Digital Nomad Family Podcast. This is the place where families who have or want to have a nomadic lifestyle come together to talk about the highs and lows that this life brings. We celebrate the joys and support each other in the hard. So, if you are a digital nomad family or will be in the future, this is the place for you. We're glad you're here. Hey guys, welcome back to another Digital Nomad Family podcast. My name is Marissa. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you so much. We're actually in part 2 of a series. So while I do think the way we do series around here, you can totally jump in at any point that you like. If you want to feel totally caught up, go back, listen to one more episode, and then listen to this one. But you'll be fine to just listen to this one and then go back and listen to the first episode of the series. So I hope that you guys are doing well. We are getting so close to moving to a new country. And I think that's why this series is really on my mind right now, because it's very personal to me at the moment. So what this series is, it's called Roaming Residence. And it's all about this idea of, as digital nomads, we move from place to place to place. And many of us, not all, but many of us don't even own a proper, if you will, home somewhere. Some digital nomads do own a home and they are renting it out, or they're Airbnb-ing it, or they're having someone take care of it for them, which is great. But I know a lot of full-time travelers that they don't have a home anywhere. And so for us, every single new place is our full-on home. It's not even like we have a home in our passport country that we really feel like is home and we're just bouncing for a while. No, this is our home. And after staying in, give or take 20 different houses and making a home for my family, I've gotten pretty good at this. And so I thought we would spend just a few weeks talking about specific things that we can do to make the new location, the new space, feel like home, fast and easy and cheap. Those are like my 3 favorite things, right? Fast, easy, and cheap. Because when you don't have like an unlimited bank account to just go in and make this new home feel 100% like yours, then you are going to have to give some sacrifices, which is fine. We all know that. We know that this lifestyle comes with sacrifice. We don't need to remind ourselves of that. We know it's true. And one of those areas of sacrifice is home comfort. And so you might get to a place and the pillows aren't as nice, or the couches aren't as good, or maybe the television isn't as big as you would want it. I don't know how often I've talked about this, to be honest, on the podcast, but my husband, Eric, is legally blind. He has, and it's not just a vision, he actually has an eye disorder that has run in his family. And so he is legally blind. And so anytime we get to a new place and the television is small, it's actually like, I know that sounds like a first world problem, if you will, but it's actually a very practical problem for us, because now it's like, oh shoot, one of us cannot see that screen. And there's actually been apartments with televisions that might be like up on the wall, and you might have to sit further back from them. And Eric will have to take like a kitchen chair or something and put it really away from us, because this is how it was when we were in Prague. Our television was so far away from the couches. And for 5 of us, it was no big deal, but for Eric, it was a big deal. And so as we're going through these series, what works for me and what I take into consideration and what I am thinking about as I'm making a home for my family, this might not be important to you. Because if you don't have someone that has a vision disorder, then it doesn't matter where the television is for you guys. It doesn't matter how big it is. But for us, that's actually something that I look at in pictures. I'm like, how comfortable, if we're in a place for 6 months, how comfortable is it going to be for Eric to watch a show with us? Because I want him to be comfortable in his house. So that's what this series is all about. It's about getting settled in as fast as we can, as cheap as we can, into that new place. And so today what we're going to talk about is some questions that I think are very important to ask every single place we go, even if we think we know the answers. It's important to get the answers to these questions because it is going to make us feel more comfortable, and it's going to just make the space and the atmosphere feel like home more. And so you might be thinking, well, how do these have a tangible effect on us feeling like home? And to be honest, I think it does, because when you're in your passport country, you instantly know the answers to all these questions that I'm about to say. You know them. You either grew up and you learned them, or just when you moved to that city, you jumped on a Facebook group or something like that, and you just found the answers. But when you're moving place to place to place, it's easy to feel unsettled when you don't know the answers to these questions. So we are going to talk about 7 very important questions that you need to know the answers to in every new place you're living. Now, we have created a resource called the Settling In Guide, and it is over on our website, and it is available for purchase. It's not expensive at all, super cheap, but it's a really strong guide, and it is going to have 5 additional questions than what we're talking about today. So it has a total of 13 questions. Let me see here. It has a total of, 13 questions. Just wanted to make sure I was right on that. So today we're going to go over some of them, but not all of them. So if you want all of the questions that I think are important to get settled in fully to a new space, you need to go over and get your own Settling In Guide. And in that Settling In Guide, it has what we talked about last week, the new space check-in. We're just figuring out, okay, what do we need in our space to make it feel comfortable for us? And then it's going to have these questions. It has your very first shopping list with your first few meals to make. It has home protection in it. And we're going to get to all of these topics here in the podcast, but there will be a little bit left out of each episode, and you will have to purchase the Settling In Guide to figure out, to have information for everything. Another section in the Settling In Guide is leaving. How do we leave well, and what can we do to make sure we don't get those weird charges or an awkward message? So I really think this is a very, very powerful resource. Not only does it have all the things that I'm going to talk about here on the show, but it also has, when needed, space for you to make your own list, space for you to make like today with these questions. It has space for you to write down additional questions that you have, but also space to write the answers in. And so I would suggest how I do this is I open this up in GoodNotes, because GoodNotes is just super easy to write over top of things, and you can erase it for the next time. So just open it up in GoodNotes, and I'll leave a link to GoodNotes down. We love GoodNotes. We use it all the time. I'll leave a link to that app in the show notes as well. You just open it up. And so a question that I ask that, again, this isn't a question that you're going to ask, so I don't have it in the Settling In Guide. But an important question for us is, how common are tree nuts in the food here? And are there certain foods that is just always going to have tree nuts? Because our one son has a very severe tree nut allergy. And there are just some places where it's like, oh, that instantly just is going to have tree nuts in it. And then there's other places where it's like, no. Latin America is fantastic as far as the tree nut allergy goes. There are other allergies you wouldn't do so well here. But tree nut for us has been great in Latin America because they're just not super common here. But then when we were in Istanbul, tree nuts were in a lot of stuff. And I've talked to people who have traveled in the Middle East and parts of Africa, loads of tree nuts. So that's a question that I would ask. Or I might ask the question, how do you say tree nut in whatever language we're in, right? And then I would write the answer in the settling in guide, so then I don't have to always look it up. And I would just ask a local that. So the settling in guide is a very powerful resource for you. So I would highly suggest going over and getting your own. So let's get into these questions. Like I said, we're going to go over 7 of them right now. And some of them might be a little bit, I know the answer to this, Marissa, I know to ask this question, but I still think they're very important to ask. And the more used to something you get, the more you get casual in it. And so I think it's good to have a reminder of like, oh yeah, I need to ask that question. Oh yeah, I need to figure that out. So number 1, you're going to go, Marissa, this is a weird question. Everyone asks this, but I know. Is the water safe to drink? If not, what do we do? So a lot of countries, the answer to that question is no. Okay, so then what do we do? And we've had various houses here in Latin America, and the water situation and how we get drinkable water is different from place to place. And so I think you need to ask that question. And I would suggest you can Google this. You can ask your host, the host of the house that you're living in. If you know some locals, you can ask them. You can Google that. I think there's a lot of different ways to get the answer to these questions, but I do think we need to get the answer to these questions. So, is the water safe to drink? If not, what do we do? Here in El Salvador, it's so convenient because we're living in an apartment building, and there's actually water delivery that comes every single day. Well, we actually didn't know this, and we kind of figured it out just by looking around and being like, hey, why are those people setting empty water jugs outside their doors? And so we were able to figure out what day water gets delivered, and then we had to go buy the large 5-gallon jugs of water. We had to go buy them because right now they're having a shortage on those. So the actual company isn't selling them directly from the truck. I don't know. It was odd, but they just weren't. And so we had to go to the grocery store and purchase the actual 5-gallon jugs. But then when they're empty, we just set them outside of our door with the money inside the jug. And then 2 days a week, they come and they pick them up and they set a filled one there. So convenient. This is the most convenient water we've had ever because it literally is at your door. So that's fantastic. But we didn't know that. We had to ask, right? So is the water safe to drink? If not, what do we do? That's question number 1 for talking about. The second one is, do we tip? Who do we tip? And how much do we tip? I think it is vital as digital nomads to, 1, not be insulting, but 2, to be radically generous to the culture you're living in. Here in El Salvador, people have opened up to us, and we are living in this country that we don't pay taxes to. All we did was get on an airplane and come here. And that's incredible. So we try to be very generous in our tips to other people. And so we always ask, do we tip? In some countries, it would almost be insulting to tip. I know that sounds weird, but it just would be. It would almost be like a slap in the face. Like, why are you giving me this money? I don't need your money idea. So just, do we tip? Who do we tip? And how much? The who do we tip comes in, here in El Salvador, it's really common to have baggers. And in Mexico City, this was common also. At the grocery stores, there are baggers. And we don't really have this in the United States. Well, we do have this in the United States, but you don't tip them. And so here, the people put your groceries in the bag, and they put it back in your buggy or just whatever, and then you tip them. You give them a little bit. And here in El Salvador, most of the people doing that job are young adults or teenagers. And it's very much like a first job idea, and they're actually not paid by the company. So there is a large chain here in El Salvador called Super Selecto, and all of the people that are working as baggers, they don't get paid by Super Selecto. They just get whatever they get in tips. And so we asked, like, hey, how much do we tip? Like, do we tip those people? It was made very, very evident that you do the first time we went to Super. But we didn't know how much, right? Like, I'm like, do I give you like a dime or do I give you $2? I have no idea. And so it kind of sort of depends on how many groceries you have, but also if it's like just whatever feels correct. So they said anywhere, the people that we had talked to, they said anywhere from $0.25 to $1. And I said, okay. So, and they said $1 is on the high side. So I always give minimum $1 because I want to be generous. And me giving this 15-year-old girl $1 to bag up my 4 bags of groceries isn't going to break my budget. So I always do $1. And so just asking those questions, do we tip? Who do we tip and how much? If you are renting a car and you have to get gas, do you tip the person that fills the car? In many countries, it's common to have gas attendants still. Again, that's something that we don't really have in the United States. And so here in El Salvador, they do. In Mexico City, they did. In Peru, they did. It's super common here in Latin America to have a gas station attendant. And yes, you tip them. And again, we always do minimum $1. That is on the high side here, but it's what we do. And so I think that is important because we want to be seen as giving to the country we're in, not as just these vampires, right? So that's question number 2. Question number 3, what is one thing we must do while we're here? And I ask this question to everyone because everyone is going to have a different opinion about it, right? It's just the same as if you were to ask your family, hey, back home in, like for us, it would be Norfolk because we like home in the United States is Norfolk, Virginia. If you were to ask all of my 4 kids, what is one thing you must do in Norfolk? You'd probably get 4 different answers because that's just normal, right? And so I love to ask this question as often as I can. What's one thing we have to do while we're here? What is a must do while we're here? Because you might get this really ambiguous small museum that people are like, oh man, this museum is so fantastic and you have to do it. Hey, great. Let's go check it out. I wouldn't have known about that museum because it doesn't really have a Google. Its website is a very old Facebook page, right? Like those are the things, but you get there and it's a blast. So I love to ask that question to as many people as possible. Don't take, I think that because of how fantastic the internet is, and I love the internet, guys. I am on the internet all day long. When it comes to planning, I mean, I am Googling things. I am looking at, if I can find a list for the must-dos in a country, getting ready for Costa Rica, I no lie, have probably been on 15 to 20 different websites just in the past 2 weeks reading their must-do lists. And a lot of them do have the same stuff, but you do then find this random restaurant or this random beach or this random activity, right? So ask that question to as many people as possible. That's number 3. What is one thing we must do while we're here? Number 4, we learned this one the hard way. Can my kids watch the local TV, or is there inappropriate content available easily? And the reason I have this as a question, in many countries, pornography is common. I think back to when we were in Eastern Europe, and thankfully, my husband and I, Eric, we figured this out before our 2 kids. We had Riley and Ryan at the time. Martin and Stanka weren't in the family yet. And we were in Eastern Europe, and Eric and I turned the TV on. Thankfully, Riley and Ryan were in their bedroom. Like it wasn't bedtime or anything. They were just in there playing. And we're like, oh, we'll just turn the TV on and see what this country has to offer. And when I say that there was hardcore pornography just on the regular television, that's not an understatement. It was extremely graphic, and it wasn't cable. It was just regular television. And so after that, we were shocked, and we were like, no one turned the TV on. We turned it off as fast as we could. It was a very shocking and scarring experience, but did not like that. We are not into porn whatsoever. And so it was very shocking. And so we wouldn't allow our kids to, Riley and Ryan, to turn on the television at all while we were in that country, because there was no rhyme or reason to it. It's not even like we could tell them, oh, you can. No, it was bad. So I think it's important to ask that question, or just go through the channels yourself, right? Even if use this as a reminder to just flip through the channels yourself and be like, okay, is what I'm seeing something that my kids can see? Because every family is going to have a different comfort level with exposure. I'm pretty sure the stuff that we were seeing in Eastern Europe, most parents would not be okay with their kids seeing. And so just go through the channels yourself and just do a quick check. We always travel with an Amazon Fire Stick. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about this if you've been listening for a while. We always have our Amazon Fire Stick. It will always and forever be with us because it allows us to be in complete control of what our kids watch. And it has all the apps, and we don't have to sign into multiple televisions. We don't have to worry about it being a smart TV. So we always travel with our Fire Stick. So for us, this question is a permanent check, right? Like, we have taken care of this question. But if you're not traveling with a Fire Stick and you are just dependent on the local TV or the apps that TV has, this is an important question. So figure out, can my kids watch the local TV, or is there inappropriate content on there? The next question that I think is important to ask is, what are the important local landmarks? And I say this because as you're getting directions, especially if you're staying in a place for around 3 months or even longer, people are going to give references, like when they give you directions, or when they ask you where you're living, when they tell you where they're located in the city. Having some of the larger local landmarks in your head, like look at a map, ask someone, even ask Google, but just what are the important local landmarks, and try to get in your head a bearing of what you're near, and then throw into your head as well a couple other ones. So then that way, if someone is like, oh, I'm out by the football stadium, you can go, oh, okay, I know where that is. And you're not just totally ignorant of the communities that you're in, right? So what are the important local landmarks? That's the next one. Next question, what local social media accounts would be good to follow, especially specifically for emergency situations? There's two to this. One, there are a lot of cities nowadays have a Facebook page or an Instagram profile, and you can follow it and you can get things about carnivals or little fairs happening or festivities or festivals or celebrations that you would not have known about if you weren't following that Facebook page or if you weren't in that group or whatever. So ask a local, what local social media accounts would be good to follow. Also then, for emergency situations, many times they will put out emergency alerts on those Facebook page or Instagram profiles. And those are really good for you to know. Like, it's good to be aware of what's happening around you. So find out the local social medias for that. The last question that we're going to talk about here, and again, there are more in the guide, but the last one we're going to talk about here, we learned this one the hard way. When I tell you guys that there is like so much in this settling in guide that is just so personal to me, you have no idea. And so the last question we're going to talk about here is, are there any regular noises or alarms we should know about? And what I'm specifically thinking about for this question is Mexico City has an earthquake alarm. That's fantastic. That's good. Earthquakes are, in my opinion, one of the scariest natural disasters there can be, because there is hardly any warning for them. And it just happens. And if you're in the house, they're just scary. I just don't like earthquakes. And we've been in an earthquake zone for so long. Guys, I'm just ready to not feel the ground shaking for a while. But we were in our apartment in Mexico, and we're sitting there, and this alarm starts going off. And we're looking at each other going, oh, that's a new one. We look outside, and, we don't see anything yet. And it just keeps going. And I was like, could it be a car alarm? And Eric is like, that's a really weird car alarm. And I was like, yeah, it is. And so he looks out the window again, and we see people now standing on the street. And then it hits us, oh, this must be, and we had heard a rumor that Mexico City did have an earthquake alarm, but we hadn't looked on YouTube to see what it sounds like. We've done nothing, right? And so we were standing there, and we were like, what should we do? It's been probably 3 minutes and nothing's happened. And so we're debating now, should we take it seriously or not? Because it feels like the earthquake should have come by now. And Eric goes, we should probably go out because that guy's in a towel. And so obviously it was serious enough for him to leave his shower and not get dressed. And so we decided to leave, and we walked out. I went downstairs, and there was a guy selling tacos right under our apartment. We became friends with him. And so I asked Anthony, and I said, hey, Anthony, and he only spoke Spanish, and my Spanish at this point was just coming along. And I asked him, I was like, what's going on? And he said, this is the earthquake alarm, but the earthquake is really far away, so it was never going to get here anyways. And he pulls out his phone, and he shows me where the earthquake happened. And it was really far away. But still, it had triggered the alarm. So then I asked Anthony, I said, about roughly how long will we have from the time that alarm goes off to the time we need to be outside because the earthquake is here? And he said roughly 45 seconds. So it's not a lot of time. It's just not. But it can be helpful. We were thankfully only on the first floor, so we only had to go down one set of stairs to get out of the building. And the alarm did go off a couple weeks later, and we did get outside. And again, there was no earthquake. Mexico City, I guess, apparently has a lot of false alarms. I don't know. We only heard them. We heard it 3 times because there was 2 real ones and then 1 test. But we had no idea what the noise was. And so I do think it's a good idea to ask either Google or a local, hey, are there any regular noises or alarms that we should be aware of? Even in a building, we have a buzzer outside, a doorbell, but it's not like a doorbell. And so that's good for us to know, hey, when you hear this, someone's probably at our door. So look around your house. Is there a doorbell? And even with kids, it's really good to be able to tell a kid in the middle of the night, hey, you might hear this thing. Here in El Salvador, across the street from us, there is another condo complex. And most of the I have yet to see a condo complex that doesn't have secure parking. Everywhere has secure parking. And so somehow the gate has to be opened. And the one across the street from us, when they pull the gate, and it's it's on wheels kind of, but there's a metal strip on the bottom that cars have to drive over. And it sounds like very loud cats. It is the most crazy noise. And so for the first 3 cars, maybe even 5 cars, we're sitting here in the apartment going, what is that noise? And you just have to kind of figure that stuff out. But make sure you tell your kids, hey, you're probably going to hear this a lot because it's been 20 minutes and we've heard it five times. And so that's what that noise is. And I think that can make kids feel oh, okay, that's okay. That's an okay noise. If your kids are anything like mine, they don't like to hear scary noises in the middle of the night. And I promise you that weird cat noise, it's I don't know, it's kind of creepy. And at nighttime, it feels even a little scarier for kids, right? What is someone screaming? Is an animal dying? It's just a lot. And so figuring out any regular noises that you're going to be hearing, or if there's any alarms in the cities. If you're in a place that has earthquakes or any other natural disaster and they have a warning system for it, you need to learn that. I know like in the United States, a lot of cities have tornado alarms. And so learning what those sound like, I just think that's a really smart idea to learn. So yeah. So that is it for the questions to kind of get settled into your home faster. And again, I think it's really easy to kind of bypass these questions, but I think knowing them makes us feel more settled in our spirit. And that's going to help us feel more settled physically. And it's going to make it feel like, okay, I know this place. I know that it's safe. I know it's safe for my kids. I know what to do in an emergency. And like I said, there are more questions to ask in the Settling In Guide. And there's a space to write your own questions. And then there's a space to write all the answers. So then that way, the entire time you're in whatever country you're in that you've gotten all the answers to, you can just instantly go back and look. You can be like, oh, that's right. They said this. Oh, that's right. They said this. And you don't have to keep remembering it because it is so easy to forget from one country to the next, from one city to the next, the answers to these questions. And so pop on over and get your own Settling In Guide and you'll be good to go with all the questions. I hope that this episode was helpful to you guys. I know for me, having the answers to all of these questions really makes me feel like I am being as responsible as possible, as generous as possible. And it just allows me to feel like I'm at home no matter what country I'm in. And that's the goal, right? That's what we want. We want to feel like, okay, we're not just visiting. We're not just here as a tourist. We are making this space our home for us, for our families. And I think that having the answers to these questions can go a long way in that. So I hope that you got something positive out of this. I look forward to hearing what you have to say about it. You can send me an email. You can jump over to our Instagram. It's Family of Dashes over there. And yeah, I just hope you guys are all doing well and continuing to travel joyfully.